Welcome to Tarot's Landing, a place where we explore tarot old and new, where the classic symbols still breathe and the newer cards still carry teeth. Settle in, take a breath, let the day fall away for a moment, and a gentle reminder before we begin. Not every reading is for everyone. If what comes through today speaks to you, you're in the right place. Welcome. And if you feel it drifting past you, if it doesn't quite hook into your life, that's okay too. Leave it on the shore with no guilt. We'll be here and we look forward to seeing you next time. As I tune in, I'm getting a mood of tides and thresholds, the sense that something old is resurfacing, not to punish you, but to be handled differently this time. There's a pull toward what's usually kept private, the foundation under your choices, the truths you don't say out loud, the places you've been fine a little too convincingly. I also feel a strong note of restraint and discernment, the kind of power that comes from knowing what to hold close, what to release, and what not to offer up, just because someone asks. So if you've been standing at the edge of a change, half ready, half wary, stay with me. Let's see what the cards want to name and what they want to soften. All right. Our first card sitting here on the far left is Sea Glass, and I have to say this feels like the emotional foundation of the whole reading. This card speaks of something that once hurt you sharply, something that may have broken cleanly, or maybe left pieces behind, and now time has been working on it, not erasing it, not pretending it didn't happen, but changing your relationship to it. Sea glass is what happens after impact, after the storm, after the moment you thought, wow, that changed me. So for many of you, this first card is saying you're not in the rawest part anymore, even if part of you still identifies with the wound. You may be approaching an old story, an old grief, an old disappointment with steadier hands now. You can hold it differently. There's also a message here about what you keep versus what you release. Because sea glass is beautiful, yes, but it began as something broken. And the card asks, not are you honouring what shaped you, or are you still clutching it so tightly that it quietly keeps cutting you? This feels like a call to gentleness without denial, to let the past become wisdom, not identity, to stop demanding that what broke be unbroken and instead ask what it has become now. As the first card, this tells me we're beginning with aftermath, with the truth of what remains. And that matters because whatever follows in the rest of the spread is going to build on how willing you are to carry your history without letting it lead you by the throat. Okay, and our second card, just to the right of Sea Glass, is Underdark reversed. And immediately this tells me we are going deeper, but there is also resistance here. If Sea Glass was saying, you can hold this pain differently now, Underdark reverse says, yes, but there is still something underneath it that has not been fully named. This feels like the part of the story that stays in the basement, the unspoken contract, the old fear, the thing you keep circling without quite touching, because touching it would mean admitting how much it shaped you. Reversed, Underdark often shows up when someone is looping. Same emotional tunnel, same kind of disappointment, same private heaviness, just wearing different clothes each time. And it's not because you're failing, it's because something foundational is still being avoided, minimized, or translated into a version that feels easier to carry. There may also be a tendency here to look composed on the surface while privately feeling stuck, burdened, or a little haunted by what hasn't been said. And I want to be careful with this card because it's not asking you to dig recklessly, it's asking for honesty with containment. So together, these first two cards say, yes, healing has happened, but don't mistake softened edges for full resolution. There is still a truth under the truth, and the reading is asking whether you're ready to stop walking around it and finally call it by its real name. All right, And our third card, right in the center of the spread, is Ocean. And this is powerful because the center card is the heart of the reading. It's the deepest current running underneath everything else. If sea glass showed us the softened aftermath and Underdark reversed showed us the truth still being avoided, underneath that, Ocean says, this is bigger than the story you've been trying to tell yourself about it. This card brings in depth, return, surrender. Something keeps coming back, not because you're cursed, not because you're failing, but because it has not finished teaching you yet. There is an emotional truth here that does not want to be managed into neatness. It wants to be felt. And I'm also hearing very clearly, stop asking for a map where you're being asked for a courage. Ocean is not a card of control. It's a card of letting the real feeling rise, even if it changes your plans, your self-image, or the way you've been explaining this situation. For some of you, this is grief. For others, longing. For others, a deep intuitive knowing you've been trying to rationalize away. But whatever it is, the center card says the way through is not force, it's surrender with discernment. So this card is asking what truth keeps returning like a tide. And what would happen if, instead of outrunning it, you finally let it carry you somewhere truer? So just pausing here for a moment, what we have so far is a reading about aftermath, avoidance, and emotional truth. Seaglass says you've already survived the break and begun to soften around it. Underdark Reversed says there is still something deeper, older, or more private that hasn't been fully named. And Ocean, at the centre, tells us this is the real current. Something keeps returning because it wants truth, not management. So we know where we are now. We're standing in the middle of a tide with one hand on the past and one hand hovering over what's next. Let's see what the last two cards want to reveal, where this is moving and what this whole process is trying to make possible. Alright, and our fourth card just to the right of Ocean is Closed Hand. And this feels very important because after all of that depth, all of that returning emotion, all of that truth pressing upward, this card says you do not need to spill everything to prove your healing. Closed hand is restraint, boundary, discernment. It is the sacred right to say, this part is mine for now. And for many of you, I think this is where the reading starts to turn practical, because it's one thing to feel the tide. It's another thing to decide what gets access to you once that tide has shown you what's real. I'm hearing very strongly, stop giving from compulsion. Stop explaining beyond what is needed. Stop offering your energy, your tenderness, your plans, your private process to people who have not earned intimacy with it. This card does not feel cold to me. It feels protective. It feels like the moment you realize that keeping something close is not the same as hiding, it can actually be how you let it grow. But there is also a question here. Are you holding with wisdom or clenching from fear? Because closed hand is powerful when it's chosen, less so when it becomes a reflex. So as this fourth card, it says, after the truth rises, choose your boundaries carefully. Not every truth needs an audience. Not every person gets a key. And your no may be just as healing right now as any confession. Alright, and our fifth and final card on the far right is the Fool reversed. And this feels like the threshold card of the whole reading. Because after Sea Glass, after Underdark reversed, after Ocean, after Closed Hand, after all of this truth, all of this feeling, all of this boundary work. The Fool reversed says, the next step is here, but something in you is hesitating, not because you're weak, not because you're incapable, but because stepping forward would mean living differently than the version of you that was built around surviving this. This card can show up when the soul is ready, but the nervous system is still asking for guarantees. When part of you wants freedom, but another part would rather stay in the familiar ache than risk the unfamiliar future. And I think that's the message here. Don't confuse caution with truth. Some of you already know what the next step is. The issue is not clarity, the issue is permission. Reversed, the Fool asked for a conscious step, not a reckless leap, not another delay, one honest move, one real beginning. Because if you keep waiting to feel completely unafraid, you may stay standing at the edge long after the moment has passed. So this final card says, yes, protect what is precious, but don't let protection become paralysis. The road is here. You do not need perfect certainty. You need enough trust to take the first true step. It was a pleasure doing this reading for you. Please subscribe for more readings.